Out of the 6 million Jews who perished, 1.5 million were children under the age of 16. 25% were children. And we know very little about who they were. They left very little, except for Anne Frank. Had Anne Frank survived, she would be considered a child survivor today. It's estimated by the academics that the Jewish children in Nazi-occupied Europe, 90% of the children were murdered. 90% were murdered. 10% of the children survived, and those of us who survived did so with the help of the Christian community, neighbors, strangers, farmers. This is an identification card. These cards were extremely important in those days. They were the difference between life and death. In this case, you see the physical description of this young girl. Now, in her case, she had blonde hair and blue eyes. Blonde hair, blue eyes was a big deal. Again, it was the difference between life and death. Because the Germans assumed that you were not Jewish if you had blonde hair and blue eyes. You could pass. If you had an identification card with a good French name, a good Polish name, a good Christian name, and didn't have a foreign accent, you could pass. You'd be hiding in the open, we call that. In this case, it has a fingerprint, it has her signature, and at the bottom, it's hard to read, but at the bottom, it says that Annie Yolande was deported to Auschwitz on September 23rd, 1942. She was gassed. And you can see the French police rounding up the Jews. The French police doing that with the help of a few Germans hanging around. On the right-hand side, you see the Vélodrome d'Hiver, which is a big sports stadium. And you can see those buses lined up. They took the Jews first to the stadium. This is especially after 1942, when after the Wannsee Conference, when they implemented this final solution, they were rounding up the Jews. And on the bottom left, you see Drancy, which was a concentration camp, not a death camp, just a transfer camp, from which there were railroad tracks that went directly to Auschwitz. And once they were rounded up and taken to Drancy, within 3 or 4 days, they were gassed at Auschwitz. These are some of the children who were caught, deported, and gassed. You can see that some of them by that time were wearing the Star of David, so they were easily recognizable. They could be picked up in the street anytime. And by 1942, the Germans had, the ones who were in France, for example, or anywhere, they got direct orders from Berlin for quotas. They had to fill quotas per day so that the Jews could be taken to Auschwitz.